Okay, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu was-salam ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een, amma ba'd. أيها الأخوة الكرام، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. ونسأل الله تعالى أن يتقبل منا ويغفر لنا ذنوبنا ويكفر عنا سيئاتنا. نسأله بعلم نافع ورزقا واسع وعملا صالحا متقبلا عليه نتوكل وإليه المصير ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Praise be to Allah, Lord of the worlds. Peace and blessings on His Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As always, after greeting you, brothers and sisters, we ask by asking Allah to accept from us, to forgive us, to give us beneficial, useful knowledge and understanding, wide sustenance, and deeds that are acceptable to Him for His pleasure. On Him we are utterly dependent, and to Him is our return and go. There is no power and might except that of Allah. Glory be to Him. Hadith number 27, as we mentioned it last time, we mentioned the margins of it really, because the hadith is about righteousness, and we will deal with that. But one of the things we talked about last time, we talked about the whole concept of Hasan Hadith, a summary of that, because Imam Nawawi judged this hadith. He said Hadith Hasanun, quite rightly, as we can maybe see later on, but it is Hadith Hasan, and we explained what kind of Hasan Hadith Hasan li ghayri last time. And he also said رويناه في مسند الإمامين أحمد بن حنبل والدارمي بإسناد حسن. He's reported, basically he's saying, we took it from the Musnad, the book called Musnad Ahmad and Musnad ad-Darimi. Musnad Ahmad, Musnad ad-Darimi. Remember, when Imam Nawawi is taking a hadith, he's taking selected hadith from the sources of hadith, the books of hadith. And Nawawi's book is not a source book of hadith. That's why there's no chain with it either. Okay, so he's taken his selections. So normally he says Bukhari, Muslim, Tirmidhi, etc., which we'll mention as well. But here he mentions Musnad Ahmad and Musnad ad-Darimi. As some scholars correctly said, that actually Imam ad-Darimi, which many people is not same as Tirmidhi. Ad-Darimi is a different person. Imam ad-Darimi is one of the contemporaries of Imam Bukhari and Muslim, same kind of time period, and he was a faqih and a hadith scholar in his own right, and he died in 225 Hijri, 225. How does that compare? If you look at Imam Bukhari, Al-Bukhari died 256, so 225, he's just a bit older, okay? So Imam ad-Darimi, but his hadith collection is not really a Musnad. It is more correct to call it Sunan, because he arranged his hadith according to topics, like Imam Abu Dawud does, and Tirmidhi and Nasa'i. Yeah. And the likes of Imam Bukhari, Muslim, Tirmidhi, and Nasa'i and Abu Dawud, they narrate hadith from ad-Darimi's collection. So he's well known, yeah, muhaddith in his own right, Imam ad-Darimi, and therefore he has his own collection, yeah, which is referenced by other hadith scholars as well, because he's a contemporary of them, yeah. And his teachers are some of the famous teachers of the other great hadith collectors like Bukhari, Muslim, Tirmidhi, etc. Okay, that's something about Imam ad-Darimi. Yeah. So now we come to, he says Musnad Ahmad. Musnad Ahmad is one of the most famous books of Hadith source. Okay, and this is the collection, the famous collection of the famous scholar Ahmad ibn Hanbal, rahimahullah, who died in 241 Hijri. So he's a contemporary again of the Hanbali school of thought, which came after. It's after Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Ahmad ibn Hanbal, of course, is the student of Imam Shafi'i. Yeah, Shafi'i, who has his own school of thought, who died in 205 Hijri, yeah, is his teacher. But he has other teachers as well. And Hadith, certainly, he has Abdul Razzaq, who is a famous muhaddith, one of his teachers, who has his own Musannaf collection of Hadith as well. And Sufyan ibn Uyayna, a critique of Hadith, is the teacher of Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Ahmad ibn Hanbal is well known as a critique of Hadith par excellence. Yeah, Faqih in him is all right, but he is so famous in regards to being a critique, yeah, one who is able to do criticism of Hadith, of Rijal, of the people, narrators, etc. Yeah, and he's famous, very famous for being imprisoned and actually released and dying at the a situation of the fitna that was around his time, of philosophical rationalist arguments of the Mu'tazila. He suffered a lot at the hands of rulers who became Mu'tazila for a time period, and all this debate about the Quran being created and not being the word of God. This is the debate that he was involved in, all to do with the actual Aqidah and theological arguments. His famous students are Imam al-Bukhari, Muslim, and Abu Dawud. Yeah, those are his famous students. And his Musnad, said 241 he passes away. He called it Musnad. Musnad comes from Sanad. Sanad means, of course, the chain. Musnad means joint. The chain is joint without any breaks. That's what Musnad means. But whenever collectors of Hadith call their books classically Musnad, Masanid in plural, they arrange their Hadith in a particular way, and hence they were known as Musnad. Although the word Musnad means connected, well, Imam Bukhari and Muslim's Hadith are also connected. So is Tirmidhi's and Abu Dawud's. Everybody who claims to have authentic Hadith with chains will really have Musnad Hadith. But Musnad as a title, they used it more technically or terminologically. What it meant was they arranged their Hadith according to the names of the Sahaba in alphabetical order, not according to topics. So it's not going to begin with the topic of Tawheed or the topic of Tahara, ritual cleanliness, then wudu, then Salah, then fasting. It's not going to go down that. You're going to find it difficult to find the topics because it's arranged according to the name of the Sahaba, yeah, in alphabetical order. And all the Hadith that Sahabi has transmitted are all there, on whatever topic. So this is what Musnad is. So he starts with Khulafa Rashid before he goes to alphabetical order as well. Yeah, to give them the greatest honor. Yeah, Hadith of Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, radiallahu anhum ajma'in. He starts with them. Then the others from the Ashratul Mubashirin, the 10 who were given the good news of paradise while they were alive, all in one hadith. Of course, more than 10 were given. This I mentioned to you before in Sirah. So then he mentions their hadith in alphabetical order. Then he begins with the rest of the Sahaba. Okay, in alphabetical order. And the women at the end from the Sahabiyat. Okay, so this is the method of any musnad. Anybody who does a musnad. So Darimi's is not a musnad by that very definition, and I just mentioned to you why it's not really a musnad. Ahmad ibn Hanbal, as Ibn Taymiyyah, who is Hanbali, the great Ibn Taymiyyah scholar, came hundreds of years later, of course. He says that Ahmad ibn Hanbal in Musnad steered clear from a group of reporters that even others like Abu Dawud and Tirmidhi took and reported from. Yeah, his conditions are better than Abu Dawud's. Yeah, yeah. And he doesn't transmit any hadith from liars or those known to be liars or those who are left and thrown. Now, when he says Musnad Ahmad, it is not called Sahih Musnad Ahmad. He never called it that. He hasn't said the condition for my collection in the Musnad is only authentic hadith. That's not his condition. Yeah. Although majority of transmitted hadith that he quotes with a full chain, are authentic. Okay. But so we say majority are authentic. There are many Hasan hadith with the Hasan condition we mentioned last time. Yeah. And much less in it are daif or weak of different levels. Yeah. And a few are rejected, munkar. And he usually makes comment about hadith, but not always. Some people claim that everything he stayed quiet about is authentic, which is not true, as Ibn al-Qayyim mentions, that it could be that it's daif. Some scholars of hadith, like Abu Faraj Ibn al-Jawzi, wrote a famous book called Al-Mawdu'at, the fabricated. In it, he collects all the fabricated hadith from various collections. And he puts some hadith, about 20 or so, from Musnad of Ahmad in his collection. Others objected to that and rejected that there are any mawdu'at or fabricated hadith, the likes of Hafid al-Iraqi, who said Abu Faraj Ibn al-Jawziyah went too far in collecting 20-odd hadith from the Musnad of Ahmad and putting them in his fabricated. There may be one or two, but others said there's no fabricated. There may be rejected hadith, but not fabricated one in the Musnad of Ahmad. This is a debate among scholars. Anyway, so somebody called Ibn Urwa, Hanbali scholar, he took the Musnad of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal from old times, and he put it into chapters like the chapters of Al-Bukhari. So now he's doing it by topic. That must be a very difficult task. It was 90 volumes, 90. Because he also did some sharh and explanation of each hadith as well. 90 volumes he wrote. So he's taken it from the Musnad kind of and put it into topics. So now it's more like Al-Bukhari and Muslim collection. Then the most famous collection now of the manuscript brought together and established for present day, all the manuscripts of the Musnad Ahmad brought together to do its editing and confirmation that this is the Musnad, is done by somebody called Shu'aib al-Arnaout. Shu'aib al-Arnaout, who died in 2016, rahimahullah. Shu'aib al-Arnaout is Albani, not Shaykh Albani. He's originally from Albania, but he spent and lived most of his time in Syria. And Shu'aib al-Arnaout was a faqih of the present day, died in 2016, as I said, and a muhaddith. and a critique of Hadith. What he did with Musnad Ahmad, he did its editing, and it is available as 45 volumes, Musnad Ahmad. And there, he also, what he does is, because Musnad Ahmad was originally written, the book itself, in the handwriting of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, right? Then later on, his son Abdullah, that's the copy that's in circulation. Abdullah took the Musnad, and most of the Musnad is that manuscript and what his father had written, right? But also, he narrated that to his son Abdullah, right? So it's corroborated by the narration to his son and by the manuscript as well. And where he didn't find a hadith, this is Abdullah, his son, which he had heard from his father, he says, I found it in the book of my father in his handwriting. That's a connected chain, okay, as I mentioned to you last time. Okay? So that's another aspect of the Musnad that's available today that is in circulation. So, and then there are ziyadat and extra hadith also included in present-day Musnad of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, which we have to be aware of, which are from Abdullah, his son, with chains to other shuyukh, the sheikhs of his father. He has added those in. So Shu'aib al-Arnaut, rahimahullah, has put a mark against those hadith to clarify that this is that category. Okay? So Musnad present day also has some additions of somebody called Abu Bakr al-Qati'i, who died in 368. The present-day Musnad of Ahmad ibn Hanbal also has some additions that al-Qati'i, who has his own chain back to Ahmad ibn Hanbal for Musnad, and he had made some additions himself of hadith. This is marked by Arnaut, great service that Shu'aib al-Arnaut did. Shu'aib al-Arnaut, who died in 2016, is not the same as Abdul Qadir al-Arnaut, who was also from same area. He was Kosovan, actually. Arnaut is used by the Turks to refer to people who are of Albanian origin or from that area. So Arnaut is linked with the fact that they're Albanian or Kosovan. So Abdul Qadir Arnaut is not a brother, although they worked together, and he was much older and died in 2004, I think, approximately. He was also a faqih, but not a critic of hadith like Shu'aib al-Arnaut. The difference in the two Arnauts are present there. Now, so that's something to say about the Musnad of Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Now, just so, because I mentioned to you Ad-Darimi, 225 Hijri, dies as his collection, Sunnah Darimi, many authentic hadith, because he was a great muhaddith as well, contemporary of Al-Bukhari and Muslim. And then Musnad Ahmad, also contemporary, a great critic of hadith, not just a transmitter, not just a collector, okay? His students, are the likes of Imam Bukhari, Abu Dawud. Abu Dawud is his famous student as well. So Abu Dawood, before we go to Abu Dawood, we should mention the main sources of hadith books. These are two already, Musnad Ahmad, okay? As I've mentioned before in discussing hadith, many Orientalists and some others have followed them from the Muslims who have learned from Orientalists and not really gone to the hadith sources, claim that the first written manuscripts that can be relied on, that's extent there was on hadith, was Al-Muwatta of Imam Malik. Imam Malik died in 179 Hijri. So he's from like the Tabi'in. Yeah. And certainly Imam Shafi'i had great praise, who is the student of Imam Malik. Imam Malik dies 179 Hijri, Imam Shafi'i dies 205. Yeah. His most famous student of Imam Malik is Imam Shafi'i. Yeah. So Imam Shafi'i's opinion, while he was alive, said that the most authentic book in knowledge after the Quran in the world is Al-Muwatta of Imam Malik. Okay, that changed once Bukhari Muslim came. Although majority of hadith you find Bukhari Muslim, you'll find them in Al-Muwatta al-Malik as well. Okay, Imam Malik Muwatta, because Imam Malik is one of the most brilliant muhaddithin historically as a critic of hadith. Yeah, and the chain going down Shafi'i to Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Yeah, Imam Malik himself, great critic of hadith. So much so that any connected chain that Imam Malik has put in his Muwatta, which has connected chain going to the Prophet ﷺ, is authentic. But he doesn't include only authentic hadith in it. He never made this as a hadith book. It has many of his fiqh opinions. It has many athar from Sahaba and their opinions and Tabi'een. Yeah, so it brings them all together. Yeah. So Muwatta of Imam Malik, yes, it contains, it's still present. Yeah, it contains many authentic hadith, but it is not a book purely of authentic hadith. That's important to know. But I mentioned that because when we say books, sources of hadith, well, you can't not mention Al-Muwatta, yeah, which came before, of course, Al-Bukhari and Muslim. But as I've mentioned before in classes, that writing of hadith didn't start. This is why they say, oh, it's a bit like the Gospels. They were written 150, 250 years after, right? And look, we have hadith of the Prophet ﷺ starts being written in the 2nd century by Imam Malik, who dies in 179. Before we had nothing. Absolute nonsense. And it's a lie. It's a lie. Because the hadith he's transmitting, he hasn't just sat there and thought, right, I'll write hadith now. He's got his teachers who've got their teachers going back to Sahaba. His chains are going back to Sahaba, and they were already in circulation, therefore, well before his time, the hadith in the time of Sahaba, yeah, and beyond. And in fact, the teachers of Sahaba, there were those Sahaba like Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As who wrote hadith, who had written a hadith. It's not extant now, but it's referred to by the likes of early scholars like Imam Malik and others. Yeah. Just because they're lost now doesn't mean they were not written, because they had access, scholars of old had access to these manuscripts. The students, many students of Abu Huraira and other students of other Sahaba, maybe majority Sahaba didn't write, but the Tabi'een definitely wrote. So those manuscripts were already available and they're transmitted from those. So that's to correct the idea the hadith were only written, Imam Malik just comes out. Whereas the gospel, there's no comparison, because the people who've written the gospel, we don't even know who they are. It's not Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. When we say Imam Malik's Muwatta, we know it's Imam Malik. We know who Imam Malik is. We know his life. Everybody knows Imam Malik. So to make comparisons like that is absolutely outrageous. There's no comparison. You don't find isnad and chains in the Gospels. False names you find. You don't even know who's written them. All of them are influenced by Paul, not by Isa alayhi salam. So and there's many Gospels. Hundreds of years later, they decided we're going to make these the Gospels. We'll reject these Gospels. Who decided? Yeah. Ours wasn't done like that. There's no comparison at all. Then we go further, and it's become established now as well amongst the Muslim Ummah, and I like to clarify it, because they say when the term for source books of Hadith, we have the Siha Sitta, the six. This is a term that's been in circulation for actually hundreds of years. As-Siha Sitta, the six authentic sources of Hadith books, or six authentic Hadith books. As-Siha Sitta. Some in English nowadays, I saw of the last many decades now, they say the six canonical Hadith books. I hate that word, canonical. What does it mean? They took it from Christianity, because they said the canonical Gospels is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Canonical. Yeah. We don't need that term to apply to the six books of Hadith. Yeah. Canonical, like, you know, a committee got together and said, yeah, we'll accept these are being holy, the rest we reject. It's absolute nonsense. No scholars with any ounce of knowledge in Hadith ever behaved like that and took only these source as a source of Hadith and rejected Imam Malik's Muwatta, rejected Ahmad. I'll come to where the six are, yeah? But this term, to say six canonical, I reject it completely. Don't use it, don't accept it, because it's rubbish. The Siha Sitta itself is not an accurate term, even though it came in circulation. Why is it not an accurate term? Because it gives the idea that all the Hadith collected in these six books are authentic. That's what you imply when you say as-Sihha Sitta, six authenticated books. So people think everything in these books is authentic, which is not true. Not true. Ask any experts in Hadith, they'll tell you it's not true. Okay. So it became, where's its origins? The first person to give the idea of a number of books, he never had the idea of this six authentic, was perhaps, as my teachers, Shaykh Abdullah al-Judai and Shaykh Akram Nadwi both said, that a scholar called Ibn Sakan in Baghdad, they asked him, his students, about the best collectors of Hadith from the thousands in circulation at that time. He dies in 353. This is 4th century, Hijrah. After Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, comes after them, in the middle of the 4th century. So they asked Ibn Sakan. So he brought with him 4 books. Al-Bukhari, Muslim, and Abu Dawud and Nasa'i. And he placed them and he said, هذه قواعد الإسلام. Because they asked him about Hadith, and he said, these are the very sources and the foundations of Islam, these 4 books. Okay? So what happened later is over a couple of hundred years later, an Imam Hafiz Abu Tahir as-Salafi, not Salafi. Salafi means predecessor. Yeah, Salafi. The Salaf are not the present day Salafi. They use Salafi for Ahlul Hadith people, don't they? But the term itself is not an insult. Salaf means our pious predecessors. It means Sahaba and Tabi'een. Yeah. But for those to claim that they are the ones, the problem happens when a group say we are the Salaf or the Salafis, we're the only ones following the Sahaba and Tabi'een. So reject all the rest of them. There's a problem there, but not problem with the term. Inshallah, we all aspire to follow the great Salaf. Is that right? Yeah. Now, this scholar was not called Salafi, he was called Silafi. And he put forward the idea of 5 major books for source of hadith. The 4 mentioned, he added to them at-Tirmidhi, al-Jami' at-Tirmidhi. He said these are the major works. Later on then came the idea of 6 books. And after that, some people from the scholars, and it became circulated in the public, obviously, more popularly, because they're not realizing what the term is implying. The idea of Sihha Sitta, they added a 6th book. Now, to show you that this is not Quran and Sunnah, this 6th term, is the idea they are chosen by scholars. And then for the 6th one, there were differences of opinion. And in Maghrib, like Andalusia, in Morocco, and in these areas, the 6th book they added was Al-Muwatta of Imam Malik. But most famously around the world, if you say Sihha Sitta, they'll say Bukhari, Muslim, and Nasa'i, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, and Ibn Majah. Ibn Majah was added very much by the Easterners, not accepted by the Westerners. When I say Eastern Westerners now, I'm talking about the Muslim world. The Westerners are the Europeans and the North Africans, as they were, Spanish. The Spanish and the Moroccan, they're the Westerners. Okay? Very close to us now, even till this day. So they're the Westerners. They didn't accept Ibn Majah, but the Easterners did. And others didn't accept Ibn Majah or Al-Muwatta. They said the 6th best, having the most authentic hadith, is the Musnad of Ad-Darimi. Yeah. Or Sunan Ad-Darimi, which I mentioned earlier. Remember? This hadith of Imam Nawawi, he said, is found in Darimi. So some took Ad-Darimi as the 6th of the 6 books. However, no doubt these are the most famous books of hadith. And if you want to say the most authentic, you'd have to say Bukhari and Muslim. There's no doubt about that. Okay? No doubt about that. They actually call their collections Jami' Sahih, the compendium of authentic hadith. Mukhtasar. Mukhtasar means Mukhtasar means a smaller collection they've taken from the many hadith that they had available. They took the most authentic. So across the Ummah, from the time of Imam al-Bukhari till this day, the most authentic book on hadith amongst nearly all scholars till this day, and that says something about Imam al-Bukhari, is Sahih al-Bukhari. Sahih al-Bukhari. According to my teachers, the 2 Muhaddithin teachers I've just mentioned before, all hadith in Imam al-Bukhari's collection that have been transmitted with a full chain from Bukhari back to the Prophet ﷺ are all authentic. Some scholars and critics of hadith critiqued a handful of hadith. Yeah. But Imam Bukhari also has something called in his collection of al-Mu'allaqat. Al-Mu'allaqat, which means suspended hadith. Briefly, I don't want to go into great detail with it. It's where he doesn't mention the full chain. He'll mention a tabi'i from there, not all the people. He leaves it suspended. That's why it's called suspended. Majority of the reason why he does that is because he's already mentioned this hadith somewhere else with a full chain, and now he mentions it as a way of abbreviation, doesn't mention the whole chain again. Majority is that. so they're authentic. Others, if the chain falls below his level, and he's very strict, falls below his level, and he doesn't find any other authentic, he'll mention it by way of saying, this is the best there is. Yeah? This is the best there is. Or perhaps mention it in fada'il, but not in ahkam, not in legal ruling. He'll mention it. Yeah? So there's a debate about the mu'allaqat amongst the scholars of hadith, etc., without going into that. So Imam Bukhari, as I said, died in 256 Hijri. One of his students is Imam Muslim ibn al-Hajjaj al-Nisaburi, who died in 261, just 5 years after Imam Bukhari passed away. And Imam Muslims, again, took the best of the authentic hadith. Imam Bukhari was even a level greater. Imam Bukhari chose narrators, that each narrator, 2 reliable, trustworthy, accurate narrators must report from such a narrator. He only took those kind of narrators. And there has to be evidence that they heard from, when they say, I got this, evidence to show, even once, that they heard or they met. Right? That's the criterion of Imam Bukhari. Imam Muslim, a bit less than that, says that they were living at the same time, they had the ability to be in the same area, so the possibility of them meeting is definitely there, as long as they are trustworthy and also reliable. So he would accept hadith. So Imam Muslims slightly less in that. Yeah. Imam Muslim wrote a separate book, a Tamyiz, the distinguishing one, in which he discusses the defects in hadith, ilal, I mentioned to you, the hidden defects about narrators, etc. He didn't complete that book. That's a book on critique. But he writes his methodology in the introduction to his Sahih Muslim. So if you want to know on what basis has he included hadith and what is his methodology in Sahih Muslim, you read the introduction of Sahih Muslim. And he explains it to you himself. Yeah. And then we have, if we take it date-wise, I'd have to mention, before we mention the likes of Abu Dawud, Sulaiman Abu Dawud as-Sijistani, from the present Afghanistan, Sijistani. The other thing you'll see with majority of muhaddithin and great scholars around the late 2nd and 3rd and 4th century, there's a massive shift of knowledge towards the area of Iraq and Iran. Yeah, because Imam Bukhari, he's Bukhara, Samarkand, Bukhara, that area. Yeah. Uzbekistan nowadays, isn't it? That's where it is. That's where he was. You wouldn't believe it. That's where he was. So his students and teachers around that area as well. And Nisaburi, which is a Muslim who did Sahih Muslim, Muslim ibn al-Hajjaj, is present-day Iran, northeast of Iran. Yeah. So Abu Dawud as-Sijistani, Afghanistan, died in 275 Hijri. So about, what, 14 years after Imam Muslim dying, Abu Dawud as-Sijistani. Abu Dawud's teacher, famous teacher, is Ahmad ibn Hanbal, who I mentioned, the Musnad of Ahmad earlier on. Yeah. In fact, he has a book called, 2 kinds of books, asking fiqh questions, Abu Dawud, to Ahmad ibn Hanbal, and another book, yeah, asking questions on hadith to Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Yeah. And then saying what he said, his teacher. So Abu Dawud is Sunan Abu Dawud. Yeah. Is one of the most comprehensive books of hadith on Sunnah. Yeah. One of the most comprehensive books of hadith on the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There is, however, another Abu Dawud who is famous. Abu Dawud al-Tayalisi. To make it more complicated, Abu Dawud al-Tayalisi, was from Basra. He died in 204 Hijri. Yeah, so he's dying about 70 plus years. Yeah, 70 plus years before Abu Dawud Sajistani comes. Yeah. Interestingly, he's also muhaddith, and he's known famously for his musnad. Musnad is a collection of a hadith alphabetically arranged by the names of the Sahaba. So there's another musnad aside from Ahmad ibn Hanbal's Musnad al-Tayalisi, who is Abu Dawud al-Tayalisi is older than Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Yeah, older than Bukhari and Muslim. Yeah, and was a well-known great muhaddith. Yeah, Abu Dawud al-Tayalisi. To make it more complicated, he was also known as Sulaiman. Sulaiman Abu Dawud al-Tayalisi, Sulaiman Abu Dawud al-Sijistani. The most famous one is Sijistani, yeah, whose Sunan Abu Dawud we have everywhere. Musnad al-Tayalisi is generally used by scholars, not available as manuscripts and translated in English as we have today with Abu Dawud's Sunan. So that's just to clarify the difference between them. So Abu Dawud sets his condition in a letter he sends to some scholars in Mecca, to Mecca. He writes in it his conditions on compiling the hadith that he put together in his Sunan. That tells you, and that letter is available still. In it, he explains his methodology. Yeah, and his methodology is in line with his teacher's methodology. Ahmad ibn Hanbal, a great critic of hadith. Yeah. And so majority of hadith are authentic. There are those less than that which are at the level of Bukhari Muslim. Then conditions slightly less than that, but still authentic. Then Hasan hadith. Yeah. Then there are some hadith which are weak. And he often, most of the time, clarifies that it's weak and what its weakness is. Yeah. Yeah. And there are some which are at the level of, I just yeah. So he says, if there's any munkar or rejected hadith, then I explain that. Munkar rejected is not just da'if, it's rejected very strongly, weak. So he says, if there is one, I explain that. Nothing under this chapter besides this hadith. So he puts it in because there's no other hadith on that heading, on that topic. But he explains that this is a rejected hadith. And why is it rejected? He says it himself. So that's a little bit about Abu Dawud, who explains his methodology. Then we have the famous Abu Isa, Muhammad Abu Isa al-Tirmidhi, from Turmuz, Uzbekistan. Imam Tirmidhi died in 279 Hijri. 279. So he's dies 4 years after Abu Dawud. His most famous teacher is Muhammad ibn Ismail al-Bukhari. Tirmidhi's teacher is, so you'll see some people suggested of the latter day scholars that Tirmidhi's corroboration of hadith is lax, but it's not true. Imam Tirmidhi's corroboration, in fact, there are hadith that others said were authentic or acceptable that Tirmidhi criticizes and calls them weak. Yeah. So my teachers, for example, Shaykh Abdullah al-Juday, says Tirmidhi has highest caliber of doing tahqiq or authentication or weakening of hadith. Imam Tirmidhi is right up there. Wasn't lax in doing that. Just behind Bukhari and Muslim. Yeah. And where he's not sure, he's actually saying it. I asked, talking about his teacher, just like Abu Dawud asks Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Tirmidhi will be seen as saying, I asked Muhammad ibn Ismail, Muhammad, about this hadith, and he said such and such and such and such. Yeah. So he actually quotes him as well, Imam Bukhari, in his Al-Jami'. And he called his book Al-Jami', the compendium. Yeah. Some people came and called it Al-Jami' Sahih, adding the word Sahih again. Yeah, but he never called it that, because when you come to Imam Tirmidhi, yeah. He never called his book Sahih like Imam Bukhari's and Muslim. He didn't. In other words, he's not saying I have only collected Sahih hadith in it. Yeah. But the thing with Imam Tirmidhi is that nearly always he explains comments at the end of the hadith. Sometimes, often about the hadith itself, how authentic it is, or whether it's weak, or whether it's Hasan, and why. Other times, he's corroborated with his teacher. Other times, even the opinion of the madhahib, yeah, and why they followed a particular hadith and which version they took. It goes into all these details. Imam Tirmidhi in his Al-Jami'. So that's why scholars say, "La yakadu yatrukun al-hadith duna ta'liqi." Almost never he has a hadith without making some comment on it. Yeah. And that's always beneficial, isn't it? When you've got a critic of hadith who, rather than staying quiet, if you find a hadith and nobody says anything after it, you don't know whether you this way or that way, unless you are an expert in hadith yourself. Yeah. So Imam Tirmidhi's comments are so beneficial and useful. So even though he hadith includes in his Al-Jami' hadith of various grades, he clarifies the grades, yeah, and takes care to doing so. Yeah. So he has in his compendium, Jami', Sahih hadith, Hasan hadith, and Da'if of various levels. Yeah. Some Munkar or Mawdu', only a few, and he clarifies it. He clarifies it himself. It's not like he's mistaken and he's put it there. Yeah. So he clarifies that. Ibn Rajab, yeah, says that some of the hadith that he has are munkar, rejected, especially in his book on fada'il or virtues, not in Islam, not in rulings, not in legal rulings. But he clarifies that almost always. Yeah. And he never includes hadith from people, those are accused of lies. Yeah. Unless the hadith is transmitted from other chains, which are authentic. And then to clarify, he will do that. So, yeah. That's something about Imam Tirmidhi. So the other two that just to mention is Imam An-Nasa'i. Imam An-Nasa'i dies 303, so the beginning of the 4th century Hijrah. Yeah. Imam An-Nasa'i, whose name is Ahmad ibn Shu'aib, is Al-Khurasani. Al-Khurasani. Nasa is in Turkmenistan, in that area again. That's why it's called An-Nasa'i. Yeah. Some say An-Nasa'i, others say An-Nasa'i. They're both authentic. Not Nisa'i. Yeah. Nisa is woman. Yeah. Nasa is the place. So some people say Imam Nisa'i. It's not Nisa'i. It's Nasa'i with a fatha. Fatha on the noon. That's very important. Died in 303. His teachers are the famous teachers of Hadith. Imam Nasa'i, those who are specialized in Hadith, he first wrote a book of Hadith called Sunan al-Kubra. Kubra, the big collection. Then he was requested to write a book on only authentic Hadith. So he took from Sunan al-Kubra and wrote Sunan al-Sughra, it is known as, the smaller collection of Sunan, or it's also called as al-Mujtaba, meaning those he selected or chose from the others of Imam al-Nasa'i. This was transmitted from him by the smaller version, the more authentic version, was transmitted famously by Imam Ibn Muhammad Ibn as-Sunni. Ibn as-Sunni is the famous, who also transmitted with other scholars the Sunan al-Kubra, but he's the only one who transmits al-Mujtaba or Sunan al-Sughra. Imam ad-Daraqutni, great critic of Hadith, came later. Was asked, when Ibn Khuzaymah and An-Nasa'i transmit a hadith, who is better at authentication? He said, it is Abu Abdurrahman, meaning An-Nasa'i. He is more cautious and careful than anyone. Some said he was even more strict in his conditions than Bukhari and Muslim. Imam An-Nasa'i. Imam Ibn Rajab says, as for An-Nasa'i, his conditions are stricter than Tirmidhi and Abu Dawud. So if you want to find most authentic hadith after Bukhari and Muslim, it's Sunan al-Sughra of Imam An-Nasa'i, even before Abu Dawud and Tirmidhi. Yeah, his critique of hadith is of that level. Some Huffaz tried to call Imam An-Nasa'i's book As-Sahih An-Nasa'i, because of the level of his authentication. However, in reality, Imam An-Nasa'i showed in his collection hidden defects in hadith he mentioned. So you can't call it As-Sahih An-Nasa'i. He himself isn't calling it that. So Imam Nasa'i himself did find hidden defects in both his bigger collection and the smaller collection, of Sunan, of many hadith. And he did jarh or invalidation of a number of transmitters. So it is better not to call it Sahih. But he clarifies that in his collection. Doesn't leave it. So we come now to Ibn Majah. Ibn Majah these are my notes. Ibn Majah in his Sunan. In it, there are many ahadith which are Sahih and Hasan. but he also included weak and fabricated hadith. The problem is not including them only, but he does not clarify between them, Ibn Majah. Okay? Therefore, his book is of a lesser grade in front of An-Nasa'i, Tirmidhi, and Abu Dawud, because he doesn't clarify. So you're left with weak hadith in it, fabricated hadith in it, even though they're not the majority, but they are there. Yeah. So if you find a hadith just in Ibn Majah and not in Bukhari, Muslim, and Nasa'i and Tirmidhi, you need to really think carefully. Yeah, it needs looking very carefully. Why wasn't it in the others? Why is it Ibn Majah? And Ibn Majah, compared to the others, who are critiques of hadith, Ibn Majah is more of a collector, less of a critique. So you've got different levels of scholarship. So there is a collection of Ibn Majah. Most of what's in Ibn Majah you'll find in Bukhari, Muslim, Nasa'i, Tirmidhi, others. Yeah, but he has his own chain. But he is not a critique of hadith to clarify for you that this hadith I've got, this is a problem with it and it's weak and this one's fabricated. He won't do it. And he doesn't. Therefore, no wonder one of the reasons why others took Ad-Darimi as the sixth book and not Ibn Majah, and the Maghribis took Al-Muwatta of Imam Malik, not Ibn Majah. This is some of the reasons why. Okay? Yeah. Imam Al-Zahabi, the great Shamsuddin Al-Zahabi, the great historian who came a few hundred years later, Shamsuddin, and a critic of hadith, a great scholar of hadith, very balanced. And also, when we say critic of hadith, his field is also Jarh wa Ta'dil, or Asma al-Rijal, which is about the narrators. Yeah, he's an expert in the narrators, as Ibn Hajar was, as Imam Bukhari was, as Ahmad ibn Hanbal was. Yeah, these are critics of it. Imam Zahabi from later time. So he says Ibn Majah was Hafiz, yeah, Sadiq, wide knowledge, but he only diminishes in his level because in his book he included rejected hadith and some fabricated ones. Yeah. Imam Zahabi then says there are 30 hadith which can be thrown away from Ibn Majah. In reality, approximately 1,000 hadith in Ibn Majah have no basis and cannot be used as an evidence. About 1,000. Okay? Of course, there's thousands of hadith there. So you see, then when you say Siha Sitta, how can you have a book where almost 1,000 hadith have no basis and say Siha Sitta? Really, like my teachers have said, even if we're going to use the term, and I don't think we need to, because again, the debate is about the sixth one anyway. And actually, there isn't just six, is there? And I'm going to show you there's many more. There's many more. Hadith scholars and fuqaha don't just limit to these books I've mentioned, do they? These are famous amongst the public. Okay? So to say even there are six, it's not accurate. You can say that Dawawin Sitta or Kutub Sitta fil Hadith, the 6 books of Hadith which are famous, and the 6th one's debatable as well, still. Yeah. So that's something about Ibn Majah. And when we look, therefore, at hadith collections, then we've mentioned Al-Muwatta, source of hadith. Present day, what's available, I'm mentioning. Then you've got the ones I've just mentioned, the 6, plus Ad-Darimi, his Sunan, plus Musnad of Abu Dawud at-Tayalisi, yeah, that's available as well. Plus Ahmad ibn Hanbal's Musnad, yeah, 97 volumes, as was done by one of the ancient scholars when he put it into chapters, yeah, and 40-odd volumes of present-day Musnad is available as a source, yeah. Then you have others books, the likes of when we come to, let me just mention to you. So I mentioned Musnad of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Musnad of Abu Dawud at-Tayalisi. There are other Musnads as well, of Musnad al-Bazzar as a source of hadith. Yeah, Musnad al-Bazzar, Abu Ya'la has another Musnad. These are sources of hadith book with chains. Yeah. Then we have books which are from the 4th century, just a bit after Imam al-Nasa'i came Imam al-Tabrani, middle of the 4th century, died around 350 something, I think. Imam Tabrani, famous for his ma'ajim, Mu'jam al-Kabir, Mu'jam al-Wasit, and Mu'jam al-Saghir. Yeah, the lexicon or compendium, you can say, the big one, the middle one, he means size-wise, and the smaller one. These are all collections of hadith from his own chains, and he arranged them. They're known as Mu'jam because he arranged them according to the names of his teachers, shuyukh, in alphabetical order. So he's found another way of doing it. So when it says Mu'jam, and he's the most famous one for Ma'ajim, yeah, At-Tabrani, he does it according to the names of his teachers. So all those need looking at again whether they're authentic or not. Yeah, Imam Tabrani. So there can be authentic hadith there, as well as weak ones, as well as rejected ones and fabricated ones. Abdul Razzaq, who's died in 211, is one of the senior muhaddithin, from the teachers of the likes of Bukhari and Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Is Abdul Razzaq as-San'ani from Sana in Yemen. He has a famous collection called Musannaf Abdul Razzaq, yeah, where there are authentic hadith and statements of Sahaba back to them, if you want to know their opinions, in Musannaf Abdul Razzaq, yeah, and of Tabi'een, their opinions as well. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to say. There are Ibn Abi Shayba has collection of ahadith, yeah. Musannaf Ibn Abi Shayba, if I can remember correctly. But Ibn Abi Shayba also has authentic hadith and authentic opinions with chains going back to Sahaba and Tabi'een. Yeah. So scholars who go beyond the madhabs, the four madhahib and others, they can go back and find authentic chains. What was the opinion of the before the madhab scholars came, of the great scholars from Tabi'een and from the Sahaba, to compare, yeah. So I think that's all I wanted to say about hadith collections. Yeah, any questions? Yeah.
Is it possible for hadith to be heard by several people from the Prophet ﷺ, and yet each one to have understood the hadith differently, yet all of them to have been authentic, because of the way that perhaps something was blessed with few words but deep meaning? Is that possible?
Yes, it is, but not necessarily a headalogs with each other. usually if you see, in fact, many instances and statements are reported by different Sahaba. Authentic, once you've authenticated them, they're brought together. Because to give you the fuller picture. Yeah, one Sahabi used certain words from even the statement of the Prophet ﷺ. You can have a difference in describing a situation, definitely. But even from the statement, there'll be a few words that are different. And some of the hadith we've been covering, I've shown you with authentic hadith, other versions of it, where the words are slightly different, but the meaning just is a variation in meaning rather than head along. He's not going to say this is haram and another Sahabi going to say, no, he said it's halal. Yeah? That's not going to happen. Not in authentic versions. Yeah? A fabricated version might be saying the opposite, but it'll be fabricated or weak, but not when they're authentic. And if it does, this is a complex topic in jurisprudence. When you have evidences that seemingly are ta'arud, there's conflict. How do you deal with it? Imam Tahawi famously deals with something like that, but usuliyun or jurisprudence experts in usul al-fiqh, this is one of the headings of how to deal with that. There's a methodology to be followed, because once it's established that both are authentic, that's the first thing you need to do. Then they look at, and we're talking about just hadith here at the moment. Then the idea of which is more authentic than the other. If it's more authentic, then you leave that one if there's any conflict. That's not authentic, because it might have a hidden defect that needs investigating as well, that we talked about before. Yeah. Or the ta'arud, the conflict, may be in your understanding of the two. Actually, there isn't a conflict, but you think there's a conflict because you misunderstood the words. That needs looking at carefully as well. Yeah. Or it could be a conflict because one was made, and this is rare, this is the last stage you go to, abrogated. And the other one is the abrogator. Yeah. And usually it's there in the hadith. I told you before about this, now it's this. Yeah. I stopped you from visiting the graves, the Prophet ﷺ saying, yeah, now I'm telling you, go and visit the graves. Yeah, that the hadith tells you itself, so that was abrogated from what happened before. Yeah. So that's the kind of a situation you're going to find. Yeah, different words, as I said to you, because transmission is allowed by majority of these scholars by meaning. By meaning. Some gave preference to meaning, fine for meaning, they had a problem with it, but likes of Ibn Hibban, for example, who is, I think, 353 or something, he died. Sahih Ibn Hibban, he's the student of Ibn Khuzaymah. Both had, well, certainly Ibn Hibban had the idea, I mentioned to you last time, he took hadith only from somebody who was scholarly. Yeah. Won't take it from somebody who had no scholarship, almost a faqih. That was one of his conditions. Yeah, but that's his particular condition. Others didn't take that condition. And I gave the reason for that last time as well. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah, sorry, it was very technical today. But although I mentioned the 6 books before, early on, this was a revision of that and an addition to it. Because there's certain things I didn't mention last time. I'm going into more detail. No more questions? No. We'll stop, inshallah, then. Barakallahu feekum. And inshallah, next week, inshallah, we'll deal with the matan of the hadith, the text, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum.